Here's another sample problem with finding equilibrium concentrations. So we have this reaction between bromine chloride, and that breaks down to produce bromine gas and chlorine gas. So we set the reaction up, right? The reaction is allowed to reach equilibrium at 500 Kelvin, and we find the concentration of bromine chloride to be 0.72 molar. What is the equilibrium concentration of bromine and chlorine, given that Kc for the reaction is 32? Well, the first thing we want to do is set up the equilibrium expression for the reaction, right? Equilibrium expression is always concentration of products over the concentration of reactants, so the concentration of bromine times the concentration of chlorine divided by the concentration of bromine chloride squared. The coefficient of 2 becomes our exponent. Now what do we know, right? We know the concentration of bromine chloride at equilibrium, and we also know the equilibrium constant value for this reaction at 500 Kelvin. So we plug in what we know. 32 equals the concentration of bromine chloride squared. We don't know the concentration of bromine. We don't know the concentration of chlorine. But if we look at the balanced chemical equation, we see for every 2 moles of bromine chloride that go in the reaction, I'm going to produce 1 mole of bromine and 1 mole of chloride. Right, so both of those, the bromine and the chloride, are going to change at the same rate because their coefficients are the same. So for every 1 mole of bromine, I'm going to make 1 mole of chlorine. I don't know either of those concentrations, but I can say, just call the concentration of bromine X, and because that's equal to, right, the concentration of bromine equals the concentration of chlorine, because they're formed in the same ratio, right, I would also call the concentration of chlorine X. And so now I get 32 equals X squared over 0.72 squared, which is 0.5184. I'm going to multiply that by both sides, right? Multiply, and I'm going to multiply this over here by 0.5184, and I get X squared equals 16.588. Right, we're trying to solve for X, right? Don't lose track of what X is. Take the square root of X, and we take the square root of 16.588 to find out that X equals 4.1 molar. Right, what does X equal? X is my concentration of bromine and my concentration of chlorine, right? So bromine would be 0.41 molar at equilibrium, and chlorine would be 4.1 molar at equilibrium. So that may have stumped you, right? Because there's 2 things we didn't know. We didn't know the concentration of bromine. We didn't know the concentration of chlorine, but those concentrations are equal to each other because they are formed in the same ratio, the same 1-to-1 ratio. I don't know either concentration. I can call bromine X, and then that makes chlorine X as well, which gives us X squared, and now we have a problem that we can solve.